UFC 243 took place on October 6th in Melbourne, Australia, where we saw Israel Adesanya successfully unify the middleweight title, improving his MMA record to 18-0 by defeating Robert Whittaker by knockout in the second round. We also saw a very impressive performance in Dan Hooker defeating top-ranked Iaquinta by unanimous decision. The main card featured top UFC talent, where they all delivered dominant performances. Overall, the whole card delivered a fantastic show, where right now it's time to determine where these fighters will go on from their victories and losses. There are certain matchups that make the most sense, which will help the winners and the losers of this card progress in the rankings. So for this video, I will be talking about the 10 fights to make after UFC 243, Whittaker vs Adesanya. Robert Whittaker vs Israel Adesanya. In the main event at UFC 243, Israel Adesanya defeated Robert Whittaker by knockout in the second round. In the fight, we saw Robert Whittaker throw everything he had, where Israel Adesanya was able to use his fast movement to swiftly move out the way, avoiding any dangerous shots, and landed many counter shots over the 2 rounds. He eventually caught Robert Whittaker with a vicious left hook and followed up with punches to get the KO victory. The fight that makes the most sense for Israel Adesanya is to face Paulo Costa next. Paulo Costa has kept his undefeated record intact with the ferocious pace he brings inside the octagon. The pressure he puts on his opponents is insane, where his volume striking has given his opponents no space to do anything. He has been able to rack up 5 impressive victories in the UFC and last defeated Yoel Romero by unanimous decision. He has some personal issues with Israel Adesanya, and this fight will be great for Israel Adesanya to make his first title defense. Another possible option for Israel Adesanya could be to face the number 5th ranked middleweight contender Jared Cannonier next. Jared Cannonier has looked like an unstoppable force since moving down from the light heavyweight division, where his opponents have surrendered themselves to the power he brings in his fights. He has kept his power since moving down from the heavyweight division, where all it takes is one shot from Jared Cannonier to change the circumstance of the fight. He has racked up 3 very impressive finishes under his belt and last defeated Jack Hermansson by TKO. He is a great option if Paulo Costa is unavailable. Another option for Israel Adesanya could be to face the current UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones in a super fight next. Jon Jones has faced the best of the best in the light heavyweight division, where he has shown time and time again why he's one of the most dominant fighters in the UFC today. His stand-up skills are always evolving and has hung in with the best strikers in the UFC. His wrestling and his ground game has been his biggest strengths, where he has been able to control his opponents with ease. Both Israel Adesanya and Jon Jones have been going back and forth on social media, and this fight could be a great option. Israel Adesanya recently mentioned that he would like to fight Jon Jones at light heavyweight in 2021. If both Paulo Costa and Jared Cannonier are unavailable, I believe this super fight would make the most sense to happen next. With Robert Whittaker losing to Israel Adesanya, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face the winner of Kelvin Gastelum vs Darren Till, who will be facing each other UFC 244. Kelvin Gastelum and Robert Whittaker were scheduled to face each other UFC 234, but an emergency hernia surgery forced Robert Whittaker out of the fight. Kelvin Gastelum would face Israel Adesanya for the interim UFC Middleweight title and would lose the fight by unanimous decision. In the fight, we saw how dangerous Kelvin Gastelum was, and he had many good moments where he kept pushing forward. Even though the decision didn't go his way, Kelvin Gastelum proved in the fight that he can hang with the best fighters in the world, and the power he brings in his fights can help him change the circumstance in the fight within an instant. This fight will be a great option if he can get past Darren Till. Darren Till, on the other hand, is making his middleweight debut after suffering 2 losses to Tyron Woodley and Jorge Masvidal. Darren Till was quickly able to make a name for himself when he absolutely dismantled Donald Cerrone at UFC Final 118 and next defeated Stephen Thompson by unanimous decision at UFC Final 130. As of right now, he's on a 2-fight losing streak and is looking to start fresh in the middleweight division. He had a very hard time cutting down to the welterweight division, where he missed weight on 1 occasion. If he is able to get past Kelvin Gastelum, it will only make sense for him to face the former champion Robert Whittaker next, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Another option for Robert Whittaker could be to face Jack Hermansson next. Jack Hermansson rose up the middleweight rankings quite drastically, where he used all of his well-rounded skills to dominate some of the well-known names in MMA. He was quickly able to submit David Branch by a guillotine choke at UFC on ESPN 2 and next dominated Jacare Souza at UFC Final 150. Unfortunately, his winning streak would come to an end, where in his next fight he would lose to Jared Cannonier by TKO. Jack Hermansson is a world-class middleweight and can give any middleweight trouble at any given day. Jack Hermansson is a great option for Robert Whittaker, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Iaquinta vs Dan Hooker. In the co-main event, we saw Dan Hooker show his well-rounded skills, where he picked Iaquinta apart and just showed how good he really is to get his hand raised with the unanimous decision win. The fight that makes the most sense for Dan Hooker is to face Dustin Poirier next. Dustin Poirier moved up from the featherweight division to the lightweight division and was able to show his true potential as a fighter. He would go on to gain victories over top fighters such as Anthony Pettis, Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, and won the interim UFC lightweight title against Max Holloway at UFC 236. unfortunately in his last fight he was unable to unify the title and was submitted by a rear naked choke to Khabib Nurmagomedov at UFC 242. Dustin Poirier has made himself into a top name in the division, and the fight with Dan Hooker would be very interesting to see. Another option for Dan Hooker could be to face Paul Felder next. Paul Felder has recently come into the zone where he has started to climb the rankings with some very impressive wins. He was able to defeat James Vick by a unanimous decision at UFC on ESPN 1 and last scraped a split decision over Edson Barboza at UFC 242. Both Dan Hooker and Paul Felder like to keep the fight on the feet, where this fight would be a great striking contest between both fighters, and it would be interesting to see who would get their hand raised. With Iaquinta losing to Dan Hooker, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Edson Barboza next. Edson Barboza has shown great improvement in his skills in his recent fights, where he's starting to look like a well-rounded mixed martial artist. He has recently gone through a rough patch where he's currently on a 2-fight losing streak. He is coming off a knockout loss to Justin Gaethje at UFC on ESPN 2 and a split decision loss to Paul Felder at UFC 242. Both fighters are coming off losses, and it is a fresh matchup in the lightweight division. It will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Tai Tuivasa vs Sergey Spivak. For the rest of the main card, Sergey Spivak defeated Tai Tuivasa by submission via an arm triangle choke in the second round. The fight that makes the most sense for Sergey Spivak is to face Justin Willis next. Justin Willis had looked great as a heavyweight, where he was able to rack up 4 wins in a row and slowly started to gain momentum in the division. One of his victories included a unanimous decision win over Mark Hunt at UFC Final 142. Justin Willis last fought Curtis Blades at UFC Final 148 and would lose by a unanimous decision. Sergey Spivak vs Justin Willis makes the most sense next, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. With Tai Tuivasa losing to Sergey Spivak, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Alan Crowder next. Alan Crowder has had a rough start in the UFC, when in his UFC debut he would lose to Justin Willis by knockout, and he would next get a win by disqualification against Greg Hardy, and last lost to Jairzinho Rozenstruik by KO in just 9 seconds. Both fighters are coming off losses and desperately need to win their next fight, but this fight would be an interesting scrap to see. Luke Jumo vs Diego Lima. Diego Lima defeated Luke Jumo by a split decision. The fight that makes the most sense for Diego Lima is to face Jake Matthews next. Jake Matthews has looked like a decent prospect in the UFC and has shown great improvements in his overall game each time he steps inside the octagon. He last defeated Rostam Akman by a unanimous decision on the same card. Both fighters match up very well against each other, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. With Luke Jumo losing to Diego Lima, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Rostam Akman next. Before making his UFC debut, Rostam Akman had defeated all of his opponents, but he hasn't been able to get his hand raised in the UFC. He would lose a unanimous decision to Sergey Khandashko at UFC Final 153 and last lost to Jake Matthews by unanimous decision at UFC 243. Both fighters are coming off losses, where it will be interesting to see who will get their hand raised. Justin Taffer vs Yorgan De Castro. And Yorgan De Castro defeated Justin Taffer by knockout in the first round. The fight that makes the most sense for Yorgan De Castro is to face Todd Duffy next. Todd Duffy last fought Jeff Hughes at UFC Final 158, where the fight ended in a no contest due to an accidental eye poke. Both fighters have knockout power, where they will definitely put on a great show for the fans. With Justin Taffer losing to Yorgan De Castro, the fight that makes the most sense for him is to face Juan Adams next. Juan Adams last lost to Greg Hardy by TKO in the first round in just 45 seconds at UFC on ESPN 4. Both fighters are coming off losses, where it will be interesting to see who comes out on top. Just my final thoughts, guys. Israel Adesanya has just looked very impressive since making his UFC debut. If you remember, he made his UFC debut against Rob Wilkinson at UFC 221. The headliner was Robert Whittaker versus Luke Rockhold. Robert Whittaker was forced to pull out, and Yoel Romero came in and knocked Luke Rockhold out. If you can just look at the time frame, so Robert Whittaker was champion and he was set to make his first title defense, and that's when Israel Adesanya made his UFC debut. And it's just unbelievable that Israel Adesanya was able to win all those fights and still fight Robert Whittaker as the champion. I know that Robert Whittaker's had unfortunate circumstances where he's injured himself, but it's still crazy to see that Israel Adesanya had all those fights and was able to work his way up the rankings. To be honest, I can't see no one beating him in the middleweight division, to be honest. This guy's just too dominant, and he was so calm and cool, calm and collected inside the octagon. It was just amazing. With his feints, with his head movement, we were just so relaxed. That next fight with Paulo Costa is just going to be fireworks. Paulo Costa, as you know, he just comes forward non non-stop pressure. He just goes headhunting for his opponents. We saw in his last fight against Joel Romero, he just put the pressure on him. And it's going to be interesting to see how Israel Adesanya deals with that pressure. But yeah, let me know about that fight in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure you hit that like button. And please hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified when we post videos. Special shout out to Mindful Combat. He does some awesome fight breakdowns. The link to his channel will be in the description below. So that was my video of the 10 fights to make after UFC 243, Whittaker vs Adesanya. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the section below. Also check out my last list video where I talk about the 10 times trash talking went too far in the UFC, and my other list video where I talk about Tony Ferguson's opponents before and after 5 times Tony Ferguson brutalized his opponents. Please do let me know what improvements I can make, and also if you have any other ideas for lists in the comment section below. I appreciate your support as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.